Welcome back, everyone. And now it's time for a moment dedicated to strengthening the core of our lives and our family. Buckle up for a moment with Dr. J, where we explore the power of healthy family dynamics and personal growth.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. J. Every Wednesday from 5:30 to 6 p.m., we will be diving deep into practical tools and healthy discussions, all aimed at one thing: empowering minds and transforming lives.
That's right. Dr. J will be helping us navigate the complexity of family relationships, building strong connection, and unlocking our individual potential.
Whether you're facing parenting challenges, navigating personal roadblocks, or simply want to build a more fulfilling life, A Moment with Dr. J is here to support you. Tune in every Wednesday for insightful conversations and actionable strategies to strengthen your family and empower yourself.
Don't miss out. A Moment with Dr. J starts right now.
Good evening, listeners, and welcome back to A Moment with Dr. J. Today we have another exciting and interesting program to share with you. To cover the topic today, I have a returning guest, none other than Mr. Mandinko D, who is an author of a few books. The Life and Times of Sir Joshua Daniel, which talks about the history of St. Eustacia and America. The Spirit of the Lion, Dragon, and Dove. Astrology Within the Bible, and his latest book, Who God Really Is. The topic today is knowing yourself, how to know yourself, the importance of knowing who you are in terms of moving forward and choosing the right path. Before we continue, I'd like to take this moment to thank Mr. Billy D for sponsoring this program, A Moment with Dr. J, 95.9 FM SOS radio station. So today we look forward to a very interesting conversation and helping us to understand who we are on that path of understanding the direction that we flow in. Mr. D, welcome to A Moment with Dr. J.
Thank you, Dr. J, for having me here, and welcome and greetings to you all radio listeners.
You know, I know you and I have had many conversations and continue to have many conversations in terms of understanding people's personality, characteristics, and how important it is for one to understand themselves and their path of life. And to today's program, the discussion is going to be a very powerful discussion because it's something that many people overlook when trying to move forward in life. And that is really understanding yourself. Because the truth is, many people want progress, many people want success, many people want to change, but they sometimes can be unclear about one important thing. Who are they? Who am I? Where am I on this journey? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And if you don't know yourself, you may find yourself walking, but maybe walking in the wrong direction, for example. Or you may find yourself jumping in things, but still feeling empty, or achieving things and still feeling empty. So today we want to go a little deeper to explore the depth of the understanding how important it is for one to know themselves. So we're going to be talking about understanding oneself and how that helps a person in moving forward or in choosing their path. So let's look. Does one understanding of oneself, does it matter, Mr. Daniel? Mr. D?
Oh yes, it is very important to know yourself, and I think it is simple as knowing what you love doing or what you enjoy doing. That is the first step into finding who you are. Consider what you like doing or what subjects you are good in at school.
So it does really matter that understanding yourself and your life direction is important, as it gives directions.
Oh, big time. I know a lot of people who got involved in the wrong career and they are suffering. They can't wait to go home at the end of the day. It's not something that they enjoy. You cannot spend your life doing something that you were not born to do.
Yes, I totally agree. And I know many cases, many persons, find themselves or come into knowing themselves a little later on in life, and then at that point choose the right path. in that direction, that move their lives forward. So, in truly understanding oneself, it helps you to really make the right decisions. That's what you're saying.
Oh yes, 100%.
And with necessary confidence, so that you may not necessarily be chasing things that just because other people are doing it, but because you want to do it or because it's your calling.
That is so true, Dr. J. Completely true.
So how can you share a little bit more on your thoughts on the importance of understanding oneself in terms of not feeling stuck, and how that helps one to move forward in the direction that they need to move forward in?
Can you repeat that, please? Understanding yourself and how you're not getting stuck. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, so the importance, how do you see understanding oneself, how important that is, and not getting stuck when one trying to find themselves on their path and moving forward?
Okay, well, like we mentioned earlier, you get stuck in life when you're into a career that is not cut out for you, that was not designed for you. Understanding yourself and what you're good at and what you like to do are usually the very same thing. So if you get stuck in a career doing what you do not like to do, you probably see someone being successful in it and you try to do it to make a living from it. You will be stuck and trapped in life because you're doing what you were not designed to do, and it tortures you. On the other hand, when you're doing something that you like to do or you're good at, which is usually the same thing, you don't really put a time limit to the end of your day. You can go on without feeling obligated.
Yes, and I know in many times I have done workshops and pertaining to persons understanding themselves, but also helping them understand their purpose in terms of how do you know what are my strengths? How do you know what am I supposed to do? For example, how would someone know that they need to be a psychologist, as an example?
Well, the book that I wrote about astrology within the Bible, it stems off from the psychological aspects of being melancholic, phlegmatic, choleric, or sanguine. When you do a character test, which would be by yourself, Dr. J, you do those testings. When you do a character and personality test to test your core character, you pretty much come to terms with what you are best at, what you're good at, and what you were designed to do. But I know what people overlook, what they don't understand, that I was trying to get to them in my book, is that being, for example, melancholic is being somber, dedicated, can look at details, can handle high-level intellectual issues. Their talents that are melancholic are the same as being an earth sign. And being a phlegmatic is the same as being a water sign. Being choleric is the same as being a fire sign. And being sanguine is the same as being an air sign. So when you come to terms with what your core character is, you have 90% of your foundation set as to what your gifts are, because each of them play a particular role in life. We can discuss that later when I get permission to discuss that.
Okay, so that's clear. When you're looking at understanding one's gifts, whether it's one melancholic or phlegmatic or whatever, one of the things that I often ask, my clients, what do people often compliment you on? What feels easy for you? What comes out of you naturally? And that is generally the foundation or base that helps you get the grounding as to the direction that you want to go in. So, for example, a person will say, I'm very good at solving people's problems. People come to me easy to talk their problems. So then you kind of feel, then you start to get a feeling like, I like helping people. I like going to do things to make people feel better. So when you start to narrow it down, then you go in the direction of, am I going to be a social worker? Am I going to be a psychologist? Am I going to be a counselor? But I find myself in a direction, in an area that has to do with helping people. Or I like to fix things with my hands. I like to do, electrical stuff. I like to take radios apart. I like to to be able to, put things back together. So you get a feel of what your passion, what your strengths are, what your natural gift are, and that also tend to help you define your purpose or your career or your direction, so that when you're creating your goals or you have a dream, most of the time it falls together, it links together in that way. Do you agree?
Oh yes, I fully agree. Do you remember me and yourself having a discussion about the different roles that the different core characters have? For example, melancholics were the sustainers, phlegmatic were the caretakers, the choleric, they were the protectors, and the air signs, which were the sanguine, they were the rulers. And we listed off a long set of jobs that were appropriate for each of the core characters. I think that was a magnificent guideline as to laying out what your nature is and what roles in life will be most applicable for you.
Oh yes, definitely, and that's very interesting. When you started to link those together, that it made so much sense, and there is a definite correlation between that. So just to kind of highlight a little bit more as to, when you say phlegmatic, what is a phlegmatic personality? How do you know that person is phlegmatic, or how would that person know that, hey, I'm a phlegmatic? What are generally some of the traits of a phlegmatic person, for them to understand who they are and what type of work that they would feel more comfortable doing as having a phlegmatic kind of personality. And because sometimes some persons are a combination thereof, sometimes they're more stronger in one area than another. But a phlegmatic personality, I'll let you to break it down a little bit, and I can also jump in there and add to it if necessary.
Well, I recall clearly that the phlegmatic people, they were equivalent to the water people in the zodiac, of the zodiac elements. And phlegmatic people seem to be very laid back, and slow pace. But in reality, phlegmatic people are very spiritual. They are in tune with people's feelings, with their emotions. So these people who are phlegmatic, who equate to the water people, they are pretty much the caretakers of the planet. They are very interested in how people feel. They are very sensitive to people's needs and emotions, and they cater to them. So we made a long list from doctors, nurses, teachers, psychologists, even self-defense instructors, anything that entails working with people, psychologists. They were the most appropriate people for this role. So even though they seem to be laid back, their strength is really in tuning in with people's feelings and emotions, and a very strong high level of empathy towards what people feel, which gives them the capacity to relate to them and treat them in a way that they feel most comfortable with them. That was the particular strengths of the phlegmatic people, who seem to be laid back.
Yeah, and to break that down, in addition to what you said, because I totally agree, these are persons who are, very easygoing. They're adaptable. They don't like no conflict. They avoid confrontation. They're very, very peaceful. So you're working with these persons in the workplace, you often will see that they avoid any type of chaos or confrontation, and will just do their work and do what needs to get done. And they are very alert. They're very sensitive, as you say. They listen.
Sympathetic also.
Yeah, very sympathetic, and they hear. So it's good to understand that personality trait, so then hey, because I'm easygoing, I'm more relaxed, that I'm more lean towards a caring feel. Yeah, and the person who may be melancholic, a person who maybe strive towards perfection and very critical and analytical, and strive off a structure, for example. How would you relate that to the earth sign?
Well, the melancholic people, they are the earth people, the zodiac. It is amazing how they correlate so well, from that perspective as well as from the scientific perspective. So the melancholic people are known to have a high intelligent quotient, whereas I forgot to mention the water people, they have a high emotional quotient, whereas the choleric have a high, adversity quotient, and the sanguine have a high, which are the air people, have a high social quotient. So they all have the strengths in their own quotient. So going back to the melancholic, their strength is the intelligence quotients, They are born with it. They can handle deciphering technical situations, mathematics, accounting, taxes. If they were to go in those fields, they will have the capacity to master those fields because that is where their core character strengths are centered around. So these ideal engineers, auto mechanics, accountant, auditors, the high intellectual task in the world, the melancholic people are the best in taking care of them. That is where the talent lies in general. God just arranged it that way, that the time that everyone is born is allotted to them, their talents that they were born to contribute to the world.
Yeah, and how would you now add to the choleric, just briefly, choleric and the sanguine characteristics of persons so that they can get an idea of who they are in terms of characteristics, personality traits?
Choleric people equate to the fire sign, the fire element people. Now they are very, strong on what is fair and what is just. They're very protective. They would fight for others, just for the justice of others. They are the protectors of the planet. They're the ideal people to be policemen, firemen, soldiers, correctional officers. These people are very, they could seem short fused, they can seem to be angry all the time, but that's not the case. They are just very intense on things going the way it's supposed to go according to what is legal. So these are really the line forces of the planet. That is why the choleric character, which is the fire sign, is so applicable to them.
Yeah, I often call them, when I'm doing trainings on understanding personality in the workplace, I call them the bosses. These are the persons who are very, they're not emotional. They're about getting the job done. They don't care to hear your story about, they wasn't feeling good. They just need to know that you're here and get the job done.
That's right.
They can seem very harsh and direct and hard, but these are the persons who generally make supervisors, who generally gets the job done. So these are the choleric type people we also relate to the fire person. So it's really good to, and I do testing on this to help person understand which one of these personality profiles they fall in, so they can better understand themselves, which is very, very important to know. Hey, am I choleric? Am I sanguine? Am I melancholic? And the sanguine personality, I call them the life of the party. These are the persons who, busy, socializing, back and forth. How else would you describe them?
Well, the sanguine people, I call them the rulers of the planet. The fire people, I call them the leaders because they are the ideal managers, etc. But the rulers of the planet, being a ruler is like a step up from being a leader because that person has the ability to keep the peace. Now, the air sign people, which are the sanguine, they do not like conflict. So they have the capacity to rule by, influential leadership, which means they can keep the peace. So these are ideal people to be at the top of the food chain: governors, judges, kings, queens, prime ministers, senators. Why? Because they have the capacity to influence people instead of dictate to them. So they can keep a massive amount of people happy and in alignment with them because they like the happy side of life. They keep people on a mellow place. So these are the people that you need to have at the top of the realm because of the capacity to influence people rather than to control them. Ideal leaders. So sanguine are, yes, the life of the party because they find a way to get along with everybody.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because when I do my workshops on this, sanguine persons generally for me are persons that goes with the flow. They see the humor and everything, but they don't take anything too serious in a sense that they avoid conflict. They avoid, they'll come and pacify and they say, don't worry with him, man, let's go do this.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, they're very into peacemaking and avoid as much situation as possible, but they're also very talkative. They are very animated, they're very playful, they're very sociable. they can be very convincing in what they want in a very seemingly non-convincing way.
That's correct.
Yeah, they have a very easy way with words.
That's correct.
And getting along with everybody.
That is why I call them influential.
Yeah, and everybody likes them. You know,
You know.
it's the life of the party because things may be quiet, and as soon as they come on the scene, they get everybody going. You know, those are the personalities that people like to get around when they have social events going on.
Yeah. But you know, the strategic thing about the air people is they just have an end goal. You know, when you're catching a fish and the fish took that bait, you don't just jerk it from the water, you will lose the fish. You play with it, you give and take. That is how sanguine people operate. It's like fishing. They know how to give you just enough to feed you, to keep you on their side.
Yeah. So, you know, highlighting the topic, you know, it's good to understand yourself. It's good to understand your characteristic and where you fit into your strengths and how to capitalize on that. So also too, and some of my evaluations, sometimes I do evaluations for companies when they're looking for managers, and you want to see really, would this person fit into this type of job, or would this person be more of an introvert or an extrovert person. So sometimes you see a person who may have a lot of energy. So what comes out in the evaluation, this person is a busybody, they need movement, they need to be busy, but yet you want them to be sitting at a desk doing a job where they don't move. And so to be able to help them understand that this person needs movement, this person is not going to be successful, this person is not going to give you the best, you're not going to get the best out of them if you have them caged.
That's my point.
You know, so it is so important for you to understand yourself, and that way you know how to move and where to move forward as to based on your strengths.
Yep.
You know, as an example. So it's so important, because I find that many persons end up in the workplace, or they end up working on projects, or they end up moving forward based on what somebody else say that they should do, and not fully understanding their own self or their own strengths as to I would fit better doing this than what they ask me to do, or what is expected of me to do. So the point here is how important it is for you to know who you are, what are your callings, you know, what you feel good doing, what are what energizes you, what gives you reason, what boosts your energy, you know. If you go somewhere, you find yourself sitting down, you fall asleep, or you go somewhere, you find yourself active moving. It's so important to understand who you are as a person and these different traits of characteristics, so that you make the right decision and the right move and moving forward in your life, and choose the right profession or the right area.
So very true. But do you remember, Dr. J, we had a discussion that most of the times one person is not 100% of one core character.
Correct.
And we equated this to the zodiac signs as well. A person can be 50% fire and 50% water, which means they can be 50% choleric and 50%, what is that word for the water? Phlegmatic. So there were 4 different sections that determined, you know, astrological wise. It was your element and your zodiac, which already equates to 50% of your core, which is your core. And then the day you were born, as well as your numerology. Well, in the core characters, you can be a mixture of all of them, but you will have a foundation which will be already 50%. And so people, although they can say that they for example, their core character is sanguine, they can also have another part of them that may be melancholic and phlegmatic. So it is very important to correlate exactly how much percent of sanguine, melancholic, phlegmatic, and choleric one is.
You know, that is very, very true, because when I do these evaluations, most of the time, most people will show up high on 2, at least 2.
Yep.
You know, there might be choleric and melancholic, or choleric, you know, with some phlegmatic. You generally have 2, so but you kind of look at it and see which one is strongest.
Yep.
And you know, in that evaluation that dominates more. You know, for example, we all have it. We all have a mixture, sometimes mixture of all 4. Which is not that common, but what's common is at least 2, sometimes 3.
Yeah, but do you also recall there was a few people who were completely fire, that it is possible to be one?
It's possible
and
to be one.
That person's character depicted exactly what being all fire meant.
Yes.
Very high strung, very rigid, you know,
very bossy,
very bossy, dominant, because
Yeah.
that person was all fire.
Yeah, they're very difficult to reason with.
Yeah, yep.
You know, and
Yep.
those things. So it's just it's such an interesting thing when you can see yourself and analyze yourself and understand your strengths and purposes, understand your strength and characteristics, so it's better easy for you to find the direction in life that you want based on what you naturally would be good at. You know, so whether it's choleric, you know, I'm naturally good at taking charge.
Yep.
These cholerics are leaders, like I call them the bosses.
Yep.
You know, for example, or you have the introverts, is more than the phlegmatic people. They don't like to go parties. They're more. So you know, that's understanding your personality, and then also again understanding what are your natural gifts in
Yep.
terms of your passion and direction and that you want to move in terms of your career, in terms of where you think I'm on earth for, what's my purpose. And whatever purpose that you're on earth for, your characteristic or your personality will lean towards
That's
that
correct.
direction.
That's correct.
And it's so important to link it or to understand that so that you choose the right
Yep.
area in
Yep.
your life based on your skills. And again to be able to take a look at what am I naturally good at?
Yeah, ma'am.
What am I naturally good at? What comes easy for me? How do I relate to people?
Yeah,
How do
ma'am.
people relate to me?
Yeah,
You
ma'am.
know, am I a problem solver? Do I need to, can I make decisions easy? Do I need
Yeah,
a
ma'am.
person to make decisions? So those are things that kind of help shape who you are, that help you get on that path and moving forward based on what your career choices could be as well.
You know, one of the things I noticed about myself growing up from a child, from the very first grade straight up to the ending of high school, I was the best student in English. I always got the highest grades for English. Look at what I'm good at as an author, writing. I was also good in gym, physical fitness, etc. And I've been a martial artist all my life. So I can see where my gifts and talents, even from my school days, were a trendsetter to show me or to guide me where my career had to lead. And I reached there.
And that is so true, because you find children too that automatically say, I want to be a pilot. They get obsessed with planes and
Yeah, ma'am.
they study everything that has to do with planes, and as the life move forward they go in that direction, or sometimes they don't get opportunity to, but later in life they will go in that path. So it is so important for us all to understand, you know, who you are as a person, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, that I can capitalize on, and that understanding to put in place to move forward. Not only move forward, but it helps you to spring forward.
Yep, ma'am.
You know,
Yep.
in that sense. So understanding oneself, moving forward, is so important in having that connection.
Yep.
You know, having that connection. So this topic has been a topic that I would, been thinking about it for a couple of days to see how I could bring it across so persons can understand the importance of taking that time to know who you are as a person, taking that time to understand yourself so you can make the best possible decision to achieve your goals and dreams and move forward.
Wonderful.
So this has been a nice, interesting conversation, Mr. D, and I would like to tell you thank you for being here and look forward to having you back on our program again in the future.
Very welcome.
This has been a moment with Dr. J. Good evening.